Hello, in today's video we are going to see the 3 ways to declare variables in JavaScript. So one way is to use the keyword var, the second way is to use the keyword let, and the third way is to use the keyword const. What are the differences? So for var we have a different scope, which is called a function scope. We have for let a block, and for const a block scope as well. What does it mean? Let's see an example here. So if I declare here an if statement and I declare also a variable x, which is going to have the value of 1, and if I try to console this variable, what I'm going to get is the value. So it is like it doesn't matter if that's inside this block of code, because again var is function scope, so it doesn't care if it is inside a block of code. But with let we are going to see that we are going to have a reference error here. So if I save, it says reference error, x is not defined. And the same with the keyword const. If I save, reference error, x is not defined. And this can happen to any block of code. It could be also a for loop where we have block of codes. However, if I change this to a function, let's say function x, and we don't have any parameters here, and I declare, maybe let's change the name of this variable, and I try to access this outside the function, what I'm going to get is a reference error that y is not defined. And actually this is going to happen, the same is going to happen with let and const, that any variable declared inside a function is not accessible outside the function. We have also something called the global scope. So this, our entire file is called the global scope. Anything outside any function or block of code is considered the global scope. So for example, if I declare here this y and I try to access that variable inside my function, it will work because this is globally scoped, let's say. And if I try to call this with the console log and I run this function, we are going to see that we have access to this value, even though I'm using the variable inside the function scope, and I'm calling it outside in the global scope. Also, I could type here another if condition, and if I try to access the variable y, I'm inside a function and then I'm creating an if statement, and this is a block of code and everything is nested, but because the variable is declared outside in the global scope, we have access to that. So if I save this, we are going to see the same result. This could also work with var and let. Moving on to hoisting, we can say that hoisting is the way some functions and declarations move to the top of our file. Even though JavaScript is read from top to bottom, sometimes that's not always the case. So for example, if I declare a variable using the var keyword x and I assign a value here and I try to log this to the console, well, I don't have any issues here. The variable is declared and I'm accessing that reference to this value. But what happens if I try to access the variable before I've declared it? Well, we are going to get undefined. What is happening is that this is moved to the top, the variable declaration, without any value. It is not assigning any value. And then I'm trying to log that value into the console. That's why we get undefined. And this is going to be the same for let. The only difference is that even though this is moved to the top of our file, let x, when I try to access this value, I'm going to get a reference error. Let me show you. It says reference error, cannot access x before initialization. And what is happening is that even though this is moving to the top, it is going to go to something called the TDZ, which stands for temporal dead zone. And the same will happen to const. It's going to go to the top, but it is going to enter a temporal dead zone, which is going to give us a reference error. And just to let you know, let and const is the right way to declare variables nowadays. Moving on to declarations. For var, yes, we can redeclare var. For let and const, no, that's not possible. Let me show you an example. If I declare the variable x here and I assign the value 1 and I try to access that value and log that to the console, I'm going to see my value there. But what if I for some reason want to declare this again and assign a new value? If I save this, I'm going to see the new value, and as you can tell, this is going to give us a lot of errors because maybe we have thousands of lines of code. So if we keep redeclaring variables, it is very likely that we are going to overwrite what somebody else did in the past. So better not to use this feature for var. That's why we have these new ways of declaring variables. If I try to do the same with let, right now VS Code is marking this with an underline here, and it is telling me that it cannot redeclare block scoped variable x. And if I try to log this to the console, yes, I'm going to get a syntax error. I'm writing bad my JavaScript. Pretty much it. And the same will happen with const. I cannot redeclare the variable. And this is, of course, a good practice to prevent mutation. And finally, about the reassignment. For var, yes, we can reassign. For let, yes, we can reassign. And for const, no. So let me show you an example. If I have the variable x here, and let's say I want to assign a new value to this variable, this is the same variable. I could console log here. If I save, I get the new value. And if I try to reassign again, yes, I'm going to get the latest value. What about let? It is going to be the same. We can reassign the value. And for const, no, that's not possible. Once we declare a variable with the keyword const, we cannot change that value. And that's going to happen for primitive data types. Keep that in mind, because when we are storing an object in a variable, we are storing that as a reference, not as a value, which means that this isn't going to point to something. Maybe seem something like 0x000 and some letters, something like that. So that's going to be stored as a reference, and that reference is the one containing the value. And you may think, well, if let is a new way to declare variables, why we can reassign values to that? It happens that sometimes we want to update a specific value given a specific instruction, and it is going to help us store and keep track of some changes. For example, if we want to sum values in a data structure, an array, or something like that, we want to keep track of that and return the result of that sum, multiplication, or whatever we are doing. For example, if we want to get the sum of the values from 0 to 10, what we are going to do is to create a for loop that is going to store the values and sum them up. Just to show you here a quick example, let's declare with the keyword let a counter, and we are going to initialize that with the number 0. And for that we are going to create a basic for loop, and we are going to start in 0. Then we are going to stop until this condition is false, and we are going to increase our variable I by 1. And what we are going to do is to reassign counter, and it is going to be equal to counter plus I. There is a shortcut for this that we could do counter plus equal I. This is going to be the same. This is just the shorthand. And if we console log the result, we are going to get 55, which is correct. And just to show you what's happening step by step in this for loop, we are going to have this column for the counter. C stands for counter right now, and this is going to be our variable we declare with let. Also, this is the same happening here, reassigning I, and we are increasing its value. So I, the first time, it is going to be equal to 0. Once the loop runs, the last step is to run this specific section here, and we are updating I by 1. So the next time or next iteration, I is going to be equal to 1, I is going to be equal to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, until 10. I is going to be equal to 10, this is going to be true, and this is the last time this is going to run. And for counter, the first time counter is going to be 0, 0 plus 0 is 0. So we are going to keep updating. Right now counter is 0, but I is 1. This is going to give us 1. Basically, we are going to reassign 1 here. Then counter is going to be equal to 1 plus 2. This is going to give us 3. Counter will be equal to 3. Now the next time this is going to happen, this, and at the end we are going to sum 45 plus 10, which is going to give us counter equal to 55. And that's why we are seeing the result here. Well, I hope you find this information useful. See you on the next one. Bye.